Hello and welcome to Mabina TV. So, what do you think about that? Is Donald Trump taking over Greenland? What do you think about Donald Trump attempt to take over Greenland? So, basically, now Donald Trump has said that he will take over Greenland. And of course, you have Greenland is a territory between the Americas and Europe. Currently, it is occupied by Denmark. So Donald Trump has said that he will take over Greenland. He says he can do it the easy way or he can do it the hard way. So what do you think about Donald Trump taking over Greenland? So is the alliance between the United States and Europe finally headed for the rocks? That is the alliance between the United States and Europe headed for the rocks. So basically, Donald Trump basically remember he has said he was for peace, but now he will be able to take over Greenland by hook or crook. So basically, now the alliance between the United States and Europe sees the 80-year-old alliance between the United States and Europe seems to be coming to an end. So Donald Trump basically has said that Greenland is strategic for U.S. national security. He says if he doesn't take over Greenland, that is the U.S. Russia might occupy the region. That's what Donald Trump says. That is Russia could occupy the region. So I think for now basically, what we need to be asking is there going to be a war between the United States and Europe? And I think that's something that basically we are going to look at. So I think right now, basically, peace is out of the window. And of course, you have Europe beginning a multifaceted force to be able to go and police Greenland. So you have a multifaceted force that is going to occupy Greenland. And of course, for now, a lot of Europeans depend on America for military protection. And of course, you have countries like Denmark, the US as their guarantor. So basically, now that alliance is out of the window. Now Donald Trump, he is going to, and I think even Donald Trump allies, such as the Italian Prime Minister, who is a hard right in her own stance, they say it is a mistake for the US to take over Greenland. So basically, I think right now, and that's something that we need to be looking out for. That is why does Ayuko. That is why we will, Ayuko, that is why we will be asking why the United States wants to take over Greenland. And I think then we will be able to, I will be able to ask so what next for Europe? I think Europe just needs to be able to. I think Europe just needs to be able to maybe rely on its own security, and that is how it is going to. This reliance on the United States as its guarantor is now dead and buried, and I think Europe needs to chart a new path forward so that then Europe can look inwards for its own protection. Remember, the military budget of the United States is close to $1 trillion. No other country spends on its military more than the United States. No other country in the world. I think the world combined the US spends more on its military than the world combined. So you can imagine that basically I think that is something that you need to really think hard about. That is, the United States spends more on its military than the world combined. So I think and what basically needs to happen. So I think for strategic reasons, the U.S. Remember, I think Donald Trump was emboldened when he took out the Venezuela president Nicolas Maduro. That was a very daring attack in which Nicolas Maduro was captured and then transferred to a U.S. It was on January 3rd, transferred to a U.S. Manhattan jail to be able to face charges on narco-terrorism. So that's Nicolas Maduro, who was transferred to the U.S. Jail, Manhattan jail, to be able to face charges on narco-terrorism. So basically, that is how the U.S. that is how Donald Trump got emboldened. And of course, you have said, and now they have coined Don Roy doctrine. Don Roy doctrine is borrowing from Monroe doctrine. So Don Roy doctrine is about America being dominant in the America being dominant in the Western Hemisphere. So basically, you have seen that. Trump's senior national security advisor, Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller says that basically the U.S. is going to, the world is governed by force, not by international honesty. So that's what Donald Trump's chief security advisor, basically Stephen Miller says, that is the world is governed by force, not by international honesty. So well, basically, should we take that to mean that Donald Trump is now going to be able to attack Greenland? So basically, you have the hard right is basically going at it, basically expanding American dominance. But of course, a lot of Trump supporters don't want America to be involved in another forever war. That is lots of that is lots of Donald Trump supporters don't want America to be involved in another forever war. So basically, forever wars, it appears every president basically has had a war on their hands. So you had Clinton, Afghanistan, debacle that resulted in Taliban taking over the territory. Then you have basically George W. Bush, Iraq War. Basically, Iraq is now destabilized. Of course, you had the hanging of Saddam Hussein. Then, of course, you have Obama, the Arab Spring, and of course, the Syrian War. And so, of course, that did not go very well. And then, of course, you had now, of course, you have Donald Trump with his own wars in at least six countries. So you can imagine that basically and now Donald Trump is on the same page as the war hawks. It appears that every American president must bend to the military industrial complex. That's what it appears. It appears that every American president must bend to the military industrial complex. That is basically what every American president must bend to. That is the military industrial complex. And I don't think it's going to go very well with Donald Trump. So basically, I think that's something that we basically need to be able to look at, and I think that Venezuela raid basically emboldens Donald Trump, so that he is now going to so that Donald Trump is going to basically go and say and remember Donald Trump has said the only limit to his power. Basically, listen to what Donald Trump has said that the only limit to his power is his own morality. So you can imagine that is what Donald Trump says that the only limit to his power is his own morality. So you can imagine that's a very loaded statement to say. And if that's the case, then Donald Trump basically is going to be a pariah. The constitutional guardrails of Congress must okay a war before someone engages in it. Just remember that Congress must pass the approval for a war before a president engages in war. But remember, the Congress did not okay the war, the Venezuela attack, nor Congress has not okayed the war that is going to take place in Greenland. So you can imagine Donald Trump in effect is a very, very strong man. And of course, what does this mean for geopolitics? What does Donald Trump taking over Greenland mean for Russia and China? For Russia and China, they see new opportunities for expansion. So, what's going to stop Russia from taking over Ukraine? What's going to stop Russia from taking over Ukraine? And what's going to stop China from taking over Taiwan? Remember, China has said Taiwan is Remember, China has said Taiwan is a renegade province that should be reunited with the mainland. Is a renegade province that should be reunited with the mainland, and if necessary, through war. That is basically what that is basically what China said, and for Russia, it's about expansion of Ukrainian territory. It's going to carve off. Remember, Russia said the only thing that is going to end the war, Russia-Ukraine war, is if Ukraine cedes the territory. It ceded Crimea, and of course, it's going to cede over the eastern parts of Ukraine. And of course, remember, Europe was courting America to be able to provide security guarantees for Ukraine, but it appears now America is engaging its own war. So basically, I think the transatlantic alliance between the United States and Europe, I think, is now dead. I think that transatlantic alliance is going to die, and of course now that is going to be taken over by EU, depending on its own military, developing its own military capabilities. That is going to be taken over by Europe, looking internally for its enemies. That ideological partnership between the United States and Europe looks dead, and of course, that's going to set off a very, that's going to alter the world's geopolitics as we know it. And of course, the United States now is going to go it alone. But of course, Europe now will have to rely on itself for its own military and economic partnership. And of course, and that means Donald Trump. Even if another president is going to come, it's very hard to undo the damage that Donald Trump. Of course, you had uh, the United States, I think Europe loved Obama, but then, of course, you had an American Republican senator asking, why do they love him? That's what an American Republican senator asked. So why do they love him? That is, why do they love, why did they love Obama? Because he was for the world order. And of course, the international order, neoliberal order that was built after the Second World War, the international neoliberal order that was built after the Second World War is now dead on arrival. And of course, that will mean that basically now Europe is going to that means that Europe is now going to basically depend on itself. The neoliberal order has collapsed, and of course, now I think the world is multipolar, especially with four key players. You have the United States, you have Europe, Western Europe, then you have Russia and China playing along. And so, of course, I think these are opportunities for Russia and China to exert themselves globally. They will be able to remember the United States has withdrawn from at least 66 international agencies, and of course, that means that the United States does not want this globalist affair. So it sees the other presidents maybe were controlled by a globalist agenda. Of course, and that will mean that Donald Trump has basically removed the United States from these international agencies. Now that means that the United States is going to be on its own, and I think that is going to usher in a new world order where the United States is alone and Europe is alone, or maybe even an imminent war between Europe and the United States. Maybe there will be an imminent war between Europe and the United States, and I think that is what is going to emerge when we look at the situation critically. So you let me know on what you think, whether the neoliberal order, the international neoliberal order, has been usurped. And of course, Donald Trump basically does not want peace anymore. He did not win the Nobel Prize. Of course, it texted the Norwegian leader that is basically that he's no longer interested in pursuing peace simply because he did not win the Nobel Peace Prize. And of course, now at least you had it said, of course, the Associated Press (AP) has debunked that as the Associated Press (AP) has debunked that claim that Donald Trump helped to end wars in at least 8 countries, helped to end at least 8 wars. And the Associated Press says that is a lie. But of course, Trump adherents say that Donald Trump has brought peace in at least has brought peace in at least 8 war-torn areas, and so of course Donald Trump, they call him as a peace president. So of course there was a petition that he should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and of course that has not gone. And of course now Donald Trump is no longer interested in war. So it appears that quite sad that every American president, and of course, a lot of Donald Trump supporters will be disappointed because if you are going to engage in a war abroad, that means your agenda, that means that the domestic agenda is put aside, and of course, that means that things such as the domestic economy, things such as the economy, and of course, the economy is going to take a bite. So, of course, Trump has said he will revive manufacturing jobs. That was the issue with tariffs, and of course, you had Donald Trump instituting tariffs as a result of those countries, the European countries, best 8 European countries that are defending the Greenland territory. So you had Donald Trump enact a set of tariffs. So basically, why is it that Donald Trump is using territorial disputes, economic manipulation to settle territorial disputes? Why is Donald Trump using economic manipulation in order to settle territorial disputes? That's something that I think you must ask yourself: why is Donald Trump settling domestic, settling tariff disputes using economic manipulation? So you had the tariffs against 8 European countries that were defending Greenland. So of course, on the domestic front, when Donald Trump instituted the tariffs against several countries. He called it the Liberation Day. On the day that he announced a set of tariffs that were going to, on the day that Donald Trump announced a set of tariffs that were going, he was going to institute against the European countries. He labeled that day as the day of. He labeled that day as the day of economic liberation day. But of course, studies show that actually manufacturing has set of jobs, and of course, for the Donald Trump, it is essential. He thinks manufacturing will restore the global dominance of America, but that was not to be because remember, even after Donald Trump instituted the trade tariffs majorly against China, you had China announcing a trade surplus of $1.2 trillion. So you can imagine that Donald Trump instituted trade basically on the day that Donald Trump announced the trade tariffs against China. China announced a trade surplus of $1.2 trillion. So you can imagine $1.2 trillion. That is the trade surplus of China. And of course, that means the tariffs are not working. And of course, you had British Prime Minister, former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, saying that tariffs don't work. And so, of course, manufacturing jobs, they say, design in America, manufactured at a low cost country in China. So basically, for America, it must be it must make the Made in America brand must both be affordable as well as high in quality. And I think that is going to mean that, remember, it is the American taxpayers that are going to pay for those studies. Of course, Donald Trump has muted an idea, is mulling an idea that basically he will be able to offer dividend checks or to ordinary Americans so that they can benefit from the trade tariff. So you let me know on what you think about Donald Trump. You let me know on what you think about Donald Trump and the trade tariffs that he instituted. So basically, you let me know whether there will be a fallout between Europe and America as regards Greenland. While I think there will be a fallout between Europe and America as regards the Greenland, of course, that's something that we're going to be looking at. And I think it is something that is quite fundamental that basically we look at a way of achieving the trade, we look at a way of settling this. We cannot afford another war between the United States and Europe, and of course, that's something that we are going to look at. So, bye for now. Till the next time. Bye for now.